Hello and welcome to The Real Bottom Line, the podcast for entrepreneurs featuring entrepreneurs. Today, my special guest is Dr. Susan Reid. She is a revisioning specialist, an advocate, an author, and a keynote speaker. There's a lot of things there, Susan. Welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Wendy. I really appreciate you having me on.
We're going to explore some different things today, but I'd love to start first off. You are a PhD. So you have taught at universities, but you do have entrepreneurial background. Tell me about that.
So yeah, there's quite a story to all of it, as there always is with these things. And basically in 1987, after I graduated from my undergrad in biology, I moved to Montreal to do my MBA at McGill. And to finance that, I was working during the day at a research lab in the science area. But I was doing this MBA at night at McGill, and I was getting more and more interested in the social sciences. In fact, it was really funny because I remember I was working as a bench scientist, and I was much more interested in the social dynamics that were going on around me in the lab than what was going on in the Petri plate right in front of me. And I really got quite interested because I was working with a few people that were champions of new product developments in the firm I was working for. And I was really fascinated in terms of, what is it that makes someone a technological champion or a new product idea champion, and what makes them really effective? And I started getting really interested in that. And in fact, I remember doing a few early papers in my MBA on that topic too, because it was quite fascinating to me. And I ended up doing my MBA in marketing and product development, in fact, and strategy. So that side of things. And around the same time, I was about halfway through my MBA, and I'd met my now husband, who was my boyfriend at the time. And we were in Toronto, and we went to York University. And we went to a talk that was given by this man named Bob Proctor.
Oh my gosh. Yes. He's like a guru in the thought. Like he's an original gangster in the whole thought.
OG.
Yeah, OG for sure.
OG, the
Yes,
Canadian
you
OG.
saw him live back in the late 80s, early 90s.
Like 89 or 90.
Yeah.
And I was trying to remember, somebody asked me that the other day, and I said, I think it was 89, but it could have been 90. It was right around then.
Yeah.
And because I was definitely still in the midst of my MBA. And he was so fascinating. So did you see him live?
I've never seen him live, but I've consumed some of his content for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, he's an incredible man. I believe he was from Toronto. Like I think I remember him saying something. He was from the Beaches area in Toronto. But I'll never forget, because his talk was absolutely mesmerizing. He came out on stage, and I also was trying to remember, I feel like he had this jacket on. It was like a bomber jacket from the early 60s, late 50s. And it was something to do with, he had won this yo-yo championship.
Yeah.
And he came out on the stage, and he had a yo-yo, and he was doing all the tricks. It was absolutely fascinating. He was the best person at yo-yo I'd ever seen in my life still. And this was like 30 years after he'd won this, or something like that, after he'd won this competition in yo-yo in, I think, like the 60s. And he was out there doing, remember Walk the Dog and Around the World and all the cradle and all those tricks. And he had them all, and he was still doing them perfectly. It was amazing. So we were all like, what is that?
Where's he going with this?
Exactly. And I remember saying to Charlie, I didn't know that I thought it was a motivational talk. And so I said, I'm motivated, but like, I'm not sure, what it's going to be about. And so he started talking about how his vision was with learning how to do yo-yo tricks, was he wanted to win the jacket that went with this annual competition. So he didn't know how to do it. He didn't know, he had to take, I guess, lessons, and he didn't know where to go to take lessons and all that kind of stuff. But what he knew was he'd seen, I guess, somebody who had won this same jacket before, and he was like, I want that jacket. That was his vision.
So the vision was the jacket.
the vision was the jacket. And he was like, okay, so, and then once he set that in motion, that vision,
Mm-hmm.
I love the story because it's so everybody can relate to it. It's super simple. Then he started putting the plan in place as to how he was going to go about achieving that vision.
Mm-hmm.
I have to tell you, I was absolutely gobsmacked. I still remember sitting in my seat and I was like, first of all, I'd never heard the word vision used in that context before.
Mm.
First time I'd ever heard the word.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, OMG, like this is, I'm going to do, I want to do something with this. And I was already interested in championing behavior and I knew they
Yeah.
had to go somehow hand in hand. I didn't really understand how at that point. And then as soon as I got back, I had a marketing professor I used to ask all these questions to. And I was like, so like, what's vision? How do you get it? Like, are people like, are people just born good at it, or is it something you can learn? Can I learn it? Like, I'm sometimes a bit shy when I meet people. At first I was like, is it something I could be good at? And I didn't know anything about it, and so except for what I'd learned in this talk. But I was fascinated, and I
And
wanted
can I
to
have a
know.
vision besides yo-yos?
Right, and can it apply in business, and how does it
Mm.
work? So she said, well, what do you consider doing a PhD on the topic? And I
Oh,
was like, you know
fascinating.
what? She said, you have, because sometimes part of the hard thing about doing a PhD is getting a good research question.
Yeah,
And I
your thesis, right?
Yes. And I thought, you know what? That's a great idea. I was
Mhm.
definitely interested in doing the research around it. And I knew I'd have to work while I was doing it, but I thought, well, just do it at my pace. And it took me 9 years. That's another story. But
Well, a
part
PhD becomes an exercise in willpower, is what I've heard.
Very true. It's an exercise in perseverance for sure. And I had two children during that time,
Mm-hmm.
but also I co-founded a business with my husband during that time, and I was teaching too.
Okay.
Um, and I
Just a few things on the
about
go.
a few things on the go. And when it was really interesting because I think part of when I learned the most about what I was learning theoretically in terms of my research was through the practice with our business
The
because
practical application.
the practical application. So it really helped me that those two things dovetailed together
Yeah.
because I saw what happened as an entrepreneur when you try to put a vision in place, and a vision that was for us, as some people refer them to visions sometimes as these big, hairy, audacious goals. And it
Yes.
was definitely a big one because we were like, okay, we're going to make ice cider and we're going to be the number one ice cider maker in the world, which was hilarious
Yeah.
because ice cider didn't really exist at
So
that
I'm
time.
going to create a category and then I'm going to rule it. Nice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and we're going to grow it. And what was interesting, I mean, it seems really straightforward. Yeah, yeah, okay, you're going to be number one. But because we said we wanted to be the number one in the world, that actually had meaning in terms of the action plan that we set out because it immediately meant that we wanted to take it beyond the borders of Canada.
Right.
So it had meaning. One of the things that I've found with vision over the years, all the research I've done and the practical experiences, the more easily you can convey it to your
Mm.
employed shareholders,
In your
your
brain.
suppliers, and for yourself,
Yeah.
easier it is. And that's why when I coach people now and train and do consulting, I'm always like, okay, we're going to whittle this thing down to seven or less, even better words that you can remember.
Yes. Right.
Just
Oh,
do
well,
it.
the process I use when I'm doing financial planning and a bunch of things, I call it clarify. So that means looking at all the things and then how do I simplify? So when it's a financial plan, it's like there's so many variables, there's so much data, there's so many things that decisions have to be made. So I call it balls in the air. How can we pull the balls down, look at them, put them in place? And then how do we simplify so that you're actually only maybe looking at two or three things on the regular because otherwise it's overwhelming and you start procrastinating, in my opinion.
Absolutely. So yeah, so that was our
Oh, I
thing.
love
And,
that.
so yeah, so there were two different things, and they both brought some meaning and structure to then working backwards to what we needed to do to make those things happen. So
Yes, yes. There's an interesting. Are you familiar with Dr. Benjamin Hardy?
No.
He has just he wrote a book that I absolutely adore called Be Your Future Self Now, which I think ties into some of the work you're doing.
Mm.
But also he just did this thing called scaling, and I saw him present this weekend, and it was all around setting an impossible goal in an impossible time, because then when you do that, your mind starts finding different ways to get there that you might not normally have done. So it's about how do you get out of linear.
Right. Yeah. No, I love that. And actually, that's one of the topics I touch on in the book is
Yes.
having that long term
Yeah.
vision. It almost seems a little unreachable. Some people
Mm,
sometimes would look at it as being maybe working towards their purpose. I like to keep things more on discussing aspirations as
mm,
opposed, because one of the things I found with my research specific to this book was
yes.
that sometimes people get hung up on the word purpose and what if it's not the right one, and what
What
if
if it's not big enough? What if it doesn't save enough people? Right. Like, yeah, yeah. So
so
let's
I
transition
really
to that. Let's talk about this. You wrote a book. You've actually written a number of books, but this one that just came out is called Revisioning Retirement. And I think this is so important because when we think about retirement, I call it life after work sometimes, is how does that work? And when we are business, whether you're a business owner or not, it does require a little bit of work to transition. There's a number of things that happen in the mind that I see. Number one is typically you're now moving from actively saving money to spending your money. That's a big shift you have to make. And the other
mm,
shift is here's this place you've been going for who knows how long. You've got an ecosystem there of peers and people you work with. If you're running the company, you're used to having, a lot of control and things like that. And now we're detaching you from that role and that identity. Have you done any research on the effects of that on a person when they leave that role they've identified with for so long?
Oh, absolutely. And so many people do talk about it. And in fact, that's one of the reasons, that's one of the pull factors for some people for staying within a
Mm,
career longer than they might otherwise want to,
yeah.
is that fear of the loss of identity. I mean, I felt it myself when I
Yeah.
retired. I remember thinking, who am I if I'm not Dr. Susan Reid? And
Right.
then I was like, this was when I retired from academia.
Yeah.
And in 2021, and then I was like, wait a minute, I still am her.
I'm still her. I still have all my smarts.
Still that person, but I, for several reasons, I had decided to. I took a fairly early retirement by academic standards at 57,
Yeah.
and I'll tell you, one of my biggest concerns was exactly that. And a good friend of mine, I remember she was the first person I ever heard use this expression. She said it's like having the invisibility cloak.
Oh,
Like, what happens when I'm under the invisibility cloak and no one sees me anymore? If somebody comes up to me at a cocktail party and says, oh, you're not working anymore. And the
oh yeah.
one
All
of
of a sudden you're not useful or something. I
yeah, and that was a concern. But the reality is that the vast majority of people can continue working part time after they leave, particularly those that
yeah.
leave early. And something like, I saw a statistic. This is in the U.S. I don't know if you know Dr. Coughlin,
No.
Joe Coughlin. He's got the MIT Age Lab,
Oh, cool.
and a recent statistic. They just had a newsletter that came out yesterday, and it was, this is US data, but it was 58% of retirees now are retiring early. So
Interesting.
that's a big number.
It's a huge number.
Mhm.
When we translate some of the thoughts into the business owner selling their business or transitioning out of it, the statistics are that 76% regret it within the first year. And I feel a
Mm,
lot of that has to do with they're a little adrift. Everything that
mm,
they identified as or focused on or made them feel the way they feel has now been moved over to someone else. So how do you do that? And I think
mm,
that's why it's so important. That's the revisioning retirement book that you've done, because
mhm,
I think that's what people need. I think I worry about people sometimes, and I don't know how valid the statistic is anymore or what the exact numbers were, but the number of people who pass away within the first 2 years of retirement
high.
is high. And I think it's partially like they slow down and their body goes, okay, now I can get sick. Or they just haven't,
Mhm.
they lose some that sense of purpose and that sense of thing that you were speaking of. And it becomes a little bit harder for them.
Well, and that's, I mean, definitely in the 4 years that I've spent doing the research for this book since
Mm,
21, not to give away everything from the book, but basically if I had to sort of categorize it, I think that is the number one thing that people are looking for meaning
yeah.
post their main work life career. Now, like I just said, a lot of people end up working part time or transitioning step by step,
Yeah.
which I think is a really if you now I didn't do it that way. I think I
You
told
did a
you the
hard
story.
stop.
Pardon
You
me?
did a hard stop to start.
I did a hard reset. We moved to Nova Scotia. We sold our business. We had done that before, and then I left the
Oh my
university. And it
goodness.
was
Yeah.
I kind of like a hard reset, but it's not for everybody.
Yeah. Some people
Some
want the
people
ease
like
in. Oh, I have a
yeah.
friend. His name's Tim Brennan. Shout out to Tim. But he owned a part of a business, and what he did is he sold his shares. And what he did is he continued to work, but he had this whole schedule of how he was going to scale back every year, so that it was less and less
Oh,
hours, right? And what he did is he was probably living a little bit of your vision in the sense of he went out and found people to play with. He tried different things to do, and he almost like made it an experiment of what would he like to do and who's he going to do it with in retirement, because
I
that's
love
another
that.
shift. Who do you hang out with?
That's like doing an alpha test for retirement. I love that.
Yes, yes. The Globe and
Such a
Mail
great
even did an article on him on it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really smart. It's wise, and everybody has a different way of approaching things. And in fact, when I left, I think I told you the story when we last met that I basically because somebody asked me, did you have did you think right away about what you were going to do and have all these concerns? And I was like, no, the first month was awesome. I did this vacation that I'd been wanting to do, went sailing with some friends
Yeah.
in America, then went to France. That was my big vision, was to go to France
And
for
then
a month.
boom, what now?
Yeah,
Yeah.
and then yeah, the
I
night
feel like there
before
is
we
this
came back.
honeymoon period in between the stoppage and the rest of life because you're recuperating. You
Yes, that's
are it because a lot of people leave, they're tired, they're burnt out, they're whatever, so they need that recuperation. It's almost like they have a 3 month vacation, and then one day they wake up and go, now what?
and that's exactly what happened to me. In fact, it happened in the Carrefour grocery store in Carcassonne, France, and I found myself on the floor.
Oh
No,
no.
no, I had a real panic attack, and I've never had one in my life. I was,
Oh my
you know, I,
gosh.
I was sweating. My heart was. I actually thought I was maybe having a heart attack, which
Mm,
and I remember because it's a huge grocery store, and the cheese aisles like a kilometer long, and I was way down at the end of the store choosing between a hunk of brie and some camembert, and I was like everything was on the floor, including me. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, I need to get up and make everybody's waiting for me at the cash.
right.
And I need to get there because no one's ever going to find me back here. This place is so massive. And I got there. And then, once I calmed down and we got back to the house, and it was our last night. And I was thinking, why did that happen? And I realized it was because I went from 100 to 0 in the
Mm,
with zero
yeah,
plan for my retirement, which was hilarious
yeah.
because, I've studied vision for 30 years. Why it's
Why
important, what
why
you
would I
want.
apply it to my real life? No. Well, I think
Yeah.
that's where the fascinating piece comes in. So let's dig into a little bit in the book because I think there's a couple areas, but let's talk about first getting ready to do these exercises. Like, because what I love about your book is that it's clearly broken out exercises to do, and also no pressure for it to be perfect, which is good too.
No.
And
Yeah.
but I think there's this prep space you need to get to, and you talk about preparing yourself to vision, and I think this can apply across the board. And I think the number one thing that you say, maybe not this way, is you need to clear all the distractions. You've got to turn off your phone. You have to get away from your computer. Like, you've got to be quiet, I think.
That's it. You need to sort of take in a real way, what's you know, what this transition is all about, what it means, and sit with it for a
Yeah.
bit. And I think that, you know, many people ask, well, you know, how do you do that? And one of the definite suggestions that I have, and what I ended up doing myself when I got back from this trip, was I started writing a memoir myself, but I suggested people to journal
Mm,
and sit down and think about the push and pull factors that led to why you left in the first place,
yeah.
because usually there's some push stuff going on from the work side, like the internal work environment, maybe internally within yourself. A lot of things that could have been the case, and then usually there's pull factors too, right? So when when we retire, which is withdrawing from an activity or a way of being,
Mhm.
I mean, that's how I think about it. It's not, there's a definition, there's a dictionary definition that actually says retirement is the act of leaving work because you're old. And that does not resonate with me whatsoever.
Holy good God.
Hope that will be changed, but yeah, so it's not relevant, I don't think, anymore, and I'm not sure it ever was, but it does mean withdrawing from something that you're
Mm,
doing, but on the flip side, it also means that, to me anyway, that you're usually moving towards something else in
yes.
terms of
It's
your
going
value.
from freedom from something to freedom to something. I talk about that a lot. Yeah. Um, I feel like most of us, the answers are inside of us. Like, I mean, the exercises are designed to pull them out, I think. But you do
Yes.
need to go into that reflection because you got to be able to hear your internal voices.
Mhm.
But so many people haven't done that, and it may be uncomfortable to get to that space. Susan, what do you recommend for people who are like, ooh, slowing down? I don't know, like being listening to my thoughts. Who wants to hear what that is? So, what do you
Mhm.
recommend?
Mhm. Because I relate to that, because I definitely, you know, myself, I've always been, as I mentioned before, like, very, my underlying value was achievement motivation.
Mm,
And it's always going to be
mm,
part of my
right.
value set and my drivers,
Yeah.
but I really felt like it wasn't during this period of journaling and reflection and talking to a lot of other people. I think connecting during this period is really important so
Mm.
that you don't
So, when
feel
you
alone.
connected with others, what did you talk about? What did you ask them?
Yeah. So, and there's sort of, for me, three ways to connect. And I think this is a really important thing because, you know, we're always in a state of either contraction or expansion
Yeah.
energetically,
Hmm.
right? And we know what that feels like. If somebody comes up to you when you're in a state of contraction and you can't really open up in some way, or if you're own within yourself, you can't open. And this is the way you've just described, you know, someone feeling like that, is that they're in a state of contraction. They're not open and available
Mm,
to thinking about what their soul's purpose is, if we want to define it that way. And I think so we need to think about, well, what kinds of, how can we open up?
yeah.
And so there's three ways to really to connect, and one is through nature,
Hmm.
like being outside.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, and that's a really important thing to do. And I also think, you know, slow meditative types of, it doesn't have to be rocket science. I like to run, but it doesn't have to, everybody's got a different thing that floats their boat, to go outside just for a walk for 20 minutes, or sit outside and get fresh air, and,
Hmm.
you know, go to the park, whatever it happens to be. I think that lends itself to being able to kind of that do that step of, you know, sitting with things. The second way is connecting with people. And I think that having discussions with what I would call like a retirement team,
A
like how do
retirement
I,
team, did you say?
and I talk about that in my book.
Okay.
So the idea is to think, and if you can think about all of these things, by the way, just like your friend did, or the guy you worked with, if you can think about these things, the earlier the better. I actually just was an expert interviewee for a Glamour UK article on Meet the Women in Their 20s, 30s, and 40s Redefining Retirement. And it's about people doing entrepreneurial careers younger, like they've worked for a while, and organizationally, and then they leave and start their own thing, or they take a maternity leave for 10 years, then they go back to a career, all these kinds of
Yeah.
things, right? So it's, how do I connect with and think about like a team that's going to help me get to where my soul again, where I want to become, how I want to become. Because there's a couple of types of visions, right? There's the doing vision,
Mm-hmm.
which when you're, sometimes when you're an entrepreneur or when you're in a business, it's like very much about what you're doing. But I coach people to try and think about the being vision. Like, who do I want to be? And because, you know, a lot of really successful entrepreneurs, if you look at their vision, it's like they had a personal vision for themselves about who they wanted to become.
Mm-hmm.
And it's that value add that resonates with other people that get involved with their products and services.
Mm.
So it's like having that vision. I'm kind of coming back to the entrepreneurship thing, but like, it's having that vision that for yourself really drives who you want to be, and that is going to resonate with who other people want to be too. You're like what some people call their tribe, right? And so I think that thinking about things from how to connect with people to create a retirement team, or a revisioning team, if you want to think about it that way. Sometimes, and I think it's important to have people that are part of your strong ties network and people who are part of your weak ties network. There's this great article, one of the best articles I think I ever read, and really influenced my thinking for my PhD thesis, was called "The Strength of Weak Ties" by Mark
The
Granovetter.
strength of weak ties.
And it's about, he talks about strong ties, how important they are, but also how weak ties are really important
Yeah, yeah.
too. And how, so your strong ties are, your family, your significant others, your close friends, the ones who really you trust, who are going to really support you and give you really good and honest feedback when you ask them, what do you think about this vision, or how I'm moving in this direction, that kind of thing. But you also, and I think also to mention, I think with significant others, it's also important to discuss with them
Mm.
the, how your vision is unfolding on an ongoing
Yeah.
basis, so that it's not that you have to overlap, but you want to be able to braid them together in a way that's going to create satisfaction for
I
the
love that
parties.
term, braid them together. Yes,
Yeah.
and it's also about allowing each other the space that may be
Mhm.
different, but then where can we come together? And like I see that every day, and even just how I structure a financial plan to sometimes address competing priorities.
Exactly. Yes, exactly. And I think that that's the key, right? It's like, how do we get the win-win
Hmm.
while addressing individual differences?
Oh,
It's
amazing. And what I love, like we going back to your definition, I'm also thinking about Dan Sullivan, this the strategic coach dude, and he doesn't believe in retirement. He's 80, still working all the like he still works and has good free time, but he says I just want to retire from things I don't want to do anymore.
That's it. I revisioned. I didn't really retire. As I said, I moved on to other stuff, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's the power of revisioning. Retirement is rethinking what it really means, and realizing that it just means you're either doing anything from a hard reset, like what I've done,
Hmm.
to just tweaking where you're at.
Yeah.
And that can be just by still maintaining the same network, and but maybe consulting or working part
Yeah.
time, and
Mentoring even or
doing volunteering
mm,
within the same space, because you don't want to just throw those networks away either. They're
no.
important and they're meaningful. They're meaningful to your identity.
Mm.
And so, yeah, so those strong ties are key. And then there's the weak ties. And the weak ties are important too, because you know, like you were saying, I'm sorry,
Tim.
what was the name of
Tim.
Tim? Yes, sorry, Tim. Yeah, I'll remember now. And so Tim, like what he did was experimented a bit with collegial networks, which is what I'm
Yes.
hearing. And I think collegial networks are really important when you're moving into revisioning, because you want to test things out. You want to try. Like, I'm thinking of joining a choir, and I'm like, I've never been in a choir except for in high school, but like, I've never been in a choir. So I was like, well, where do I start? Who do I call? And
Yeah.
the ties can sometimes provide the most the newest ideas and information to you, because you haven't been, you're not going over the same
Yeah.
information much. You're going into new spaces where you're gaining new information from these weak ties. And sometimes they'll be collegial, and sometimes they may be experts, people that,
Right.
who are working in fields that you're not, like people whose expertise you may need, like a lawyer or a retirement planner or
Yeah.
wealth management planner, or they may be experts in terms of if you decided to do something entrepreneurial in a field that you're interested in getting into, but you don't know anything about it, or you don't know as much about it as you'd like to. So you need to have a plan for how to access those kinds of networks where you're going to get really meaningful and important information and new information.
When I think of visioning and I think of where some of the hurdles are too, I believe that some of it is that we automatically go to how. So I think it's important to put the vision up and not worry about how you're going to get there, because that shows up once you know what you're doing. And it also allows you, I think, to be more discerning, and it, I think, releases some of the decision making fatigue we get attached to, because, oh, should I do that or should I do this? Well, if you've set the vision about everything, it becomes a little more obvious. Maybe you could speak to that and how to, when you're doing the visioning, let go of the how you're going to implement that.
Yeah. So the way I get to this is sort of looking at it through a values
Mm.
vision lens, like the values vision
Yeah.
connection. So it takes the what, uh, the what, the how elements, kind of out of it, through the gates. And something you said that's really important earlier was just this idea that, um, you know, often that being vision that seed's always been there within us.
Yeah.
It's just opening up to it, watering it, letting the light in, all those things. I heard
You
this
could come
garden.
out to play now. Come on.
That's it. That's it. The gardening metaphor I've heard many times, and I think it's a great one, because it really makes a lot of sense to me. And I think that, the idea is, opening again, back to opening, why it's so important is that once we allow that process of opening through so I didn't
Oh,
say
you
what the
got
third.
nature people. What was third?
Nature people, and the third one is, let's call it the
Oh,
universe.
okay.
Some people would call it spirit or soul, and but the universe is more broadly, you know, what you perceive to be within you, that's not part of the other realm. um, so just, and I think sometimes it's tapping into that. And for me, like I said, I was always this achievement orientation, like that was almost my focus. And then when I left the university, my big thing, like I had this kind of feeling like I feel like I need to be a student again,
Mm.
and I want to learn about spirituality. And then and it was really that was my being vision. I was like, that's what I and I feel a lot of people, that's where they go, when they really allow themselves to sort of think about these things, is that they want something more than just, I want to make money, or I want to, you know some of those values that you have when you're younger, and they're important values to have when you're young, to, because you're bringing up a family, you're buying a house, all of these things. And they are important values. But then sometimes you have to think about, what am I becoming as a person,
Yeah.
right? So I ask the question, okay, I go through several exercises designed to look at who's your authentic self.
Yeah.
Like, when you're in flow, what do you love to do? What do you really value? What's your like go-to value? What are
Mm.
your go-to values that really drive how you tend to make decisions, right? And then I say, okay, it's because it's important to understand who you are, because that's what gives you the energy, like your authentic
Yeah.
self. Like, I love to karaoke. I love to sing, right? So, and I'm not good. It doesn't matter. But if you come to my house, you'll find I'll usually pull a microphone out at some point during the evening and get people singing. So,
Oh,
it's
hilarious.
just, yeah, and it's like, that's authentic me. That's who I, and that's not gonna change, right?
Yeah.
And it gives me the energy to pursue, when I do those kinds of
Yes.
things, to do my aspirational
Yeah.
level stuff.
Yeah.
Right. So you can't say goodbye to that. You want to bring it along and then figure out how you're going to layer the two together, bridge the two together.
Well,
And then,
it feels
yeah,
like when you say that, how my values showed up might be a bit different when I'm younger. They might show up differently when I'm tapped in and I'm in a different situation, such as retirement.
exactly. And I think it's a natural process, right? Like, I mean, remember good old Maslow's
Yes.
hierarchy of needs that we all learned in high school and university. And I mean, it really does show pretty clearly that you have to have those basic needs met to feel safe,
Yeah.
right? Like shelter and food and all of those things. And unless you're meeting those needs, it's really hard to get to that highest level of, building yourself. It's like
Yeah.
self-esteem and self-awareness and all of the higher, realms of that triangle. And I think that that's what happens as we age, and is that we've hopefully, not everyone is able to, and I understand that, but if we've had in some cases it's good fortune, in other cases too it's being, having actively kind of tried to move through that
Yeah.
to get to those higher levels of Maslow's triangle. And once you're in that realm, then you start asking different questions of yourself.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Susan, I could talk to you all day. That's honest. So, but what is something I have to end on today? Is there anything I didn't ask you about your book or about visioning in retirement that I should have, or that you'd like to add to the conversation?
No, I think we've covered a lot of material. I hope that your listeners, it resonates with them, and that they're interested in learning more. And I think, if I had to leave you with one take home message, it's that, revisioning and revisioning retirement are really about the art of becoming. It's a science, but it's an art, and it's, allowing yourself the space and time to kind of play a little bit in that sandbox to, see who it is you really want to become and how you want to do that. And that's what the book's about.
That's awesome. How can people reach you?
So the easiest way is on my website, susanreid.com, and you can connect with me by email through there. And I'm also on LinkedIn. Those are the two easiest ways. And the book's available on Amazon.ca and Amazon.com.
Woo, awesome. Okay. Thank you so much, Susan. And I think you did get the bottom line already in terms of re-envisioning and visioning is important part of becoming your more authentic self. So thank you so much for your time. And we'll chat again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. And thank you to your audience, too, for listening.
Thank you.
Okay.